Hello, it's Charlene Lee, and looking forward to the session today. It's our last broadcast, the live stream for the year. And so I wanted to take the time to take a look back at our wonderful, awful year of 2022. It's hard to believe that year has already passed so quickly. And in preparing for this, I just realized how much we have been through. And the year has been awful in so many ways. We've had the rise of Omicron at the rise at end of 2021. It's just a horrible winter. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We've had inflation, recession fears, politics, so many things. And in many ways, it has also forced us to grow in many unexpected ways. So that's what I want to talk about today is what have we been through? Just take a moment to reflect. And then also take a moment to say, what have we learned and taken away from the year? And then also in preparation for the year coming. So in many ways, I feel like with the Collins Dictionary, word of the year is a perma crisis. So a permanent crisis. That's what 2022 really felt like to me, and for many of us. And when I did a little bit of research into this, what is the origin of the word crisis? It comes from the Greek word, and it means there's a moment in time. And it's an opportunity that when you're in this moment of crisis, you have a particular time when you could flip into victory or defeat. You can have great outcomes or not great outcomes. So you're at this really important point and decisions have to be made. And it's how we respond in those moments of crisis that determines how well we will do. But I think one of the problems is that we are hit with crisis after crisis. So we're not trying to find a solution for a particular problem to find that opportunity. We're just learning to manage our way, just to hang by our fingertips and to be able to just get there. So these crises that we face now aren't some things to be solved, but rather to be managed. And that's one of the most important things to take away from this year is that I think in many ways, we're not giving ourselves enough credit, that we aren't thinking about just how well we have done over the past year. And while it has not been great in so many ways, so much loss, so much turmoil, we've come out of it. And hopefully we've come out of it in new and unexpected ways that we have grown and learned along the way. So with the adage that, with that saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, I thought I'd just take a quick review of what's happened over the past year. I have 3 experiences, and then I also want to just take away 3 learnings from, again, just reviewing some of the things we've talked about in this live stream. So the 3 experiences, first of all, is just learning to live with COVID in a new way. I think this is the year that we finally looked forward to, especially at the beginning of the year. Well, maybe we're coming out of this now. And then Omicron hit, and it was a terrible winter. There were so many people getting sick. But as the summer turned and things really, the cases just really went down, we learned to get better at this, to stay home when we were sick, to wear a mask if we weren't feeling well, to just be more considerate of our family, friends, and colleagues. I actually caught COVID twice in August and just most recently here in mid-November. And fortunately, very luckily, I got back to normal within a week. But it also hit me and my family personally. I lost my sister-in-law after a long battle with cancer, and COVID was in the end. She caught it and passed away in August. So it was also a time of learning to live with that loss that comes with life, but also learning to celebrate also a beautiful life that was lived. And I think what many of us have gone through that over the past couple of years and continue to do that. So the second thing I would say is about the shortages that we had around supplies and the supply chain caused again by the changes with COVID happening, the shortages, but also with the Ukraine war, with food shortages, energy shortages, and the strong focus now on sustainability, and in particular with supply chains changing and the energy transition being really strong focus. It was really interesting seeing the difference between COP26 and COP27, the big summit around climate. And last fall, the biggest thing that came out of the conference was a little bit disappointing. It was a promise to revisit our energy emissions and to strengthen and to revisit plans to reduce emissions before our next conference in 2022. And this past November, it was a really different conference that happened in Egypt. It was the establishment of a damage and loss fund that the more established countries would use to help fund climate change impacts in countries that didn't have that financing. And in particular, there's a focus on climate finance and a renewed commitment to really make this work, make it a win-win. And instead of thinking of climate as something we have to pay for as a cost, as something that we could also win from, in that it could drive business and investment. And I think there's a lot of learning, unfortunately, very slowly around how to do this. But I think also one thing that came out of this was the emergence of a circular economy, the idea that we can recycle and reuse the goods that we have. And my personal experience of this is with clothing and goods. I've talked about in the past how I use Nuuly, Nuuly, to rent and to buy clothes on thrift, because I want to reduce my footprint in the world, that the way I tread in it. I want to walk more lightly in the world. And one of the things that I also love is at Patagonia, they'll walk you through repairs of how to fix the clothing to make it last as long as possible. And they'll even buy back your clothing to resell. You can buy things that are lightly worn on their site called worn wear. So in many ways, this personally just has been a year of just learning to do more with less. And I have this secret wish to live a nomadic life and live what I call a four-bin life. After I came back from my first Burning Man in 2019, I looked at my bins and realized I was really happy living out of a few bins for a week. So I took these big, plastic bins that you get at Target that you have in storage, empty out a bunch of them, and started filling them and wondering, how many bins do I need to be happy, to live? And I realized it was just 4 bins. And so this past year has been about downsizing, minimizing, just getting rid of things and just reducing my footprint, literally the place where I live, into smaller and smaller compartments so that I can, again, just do more with less is the idea. And the third thing is just there was just a lot of fear and uncertainty this year. I was looking back at my live streams and articles, and one of the things I wrote about was, how do you lead in uncertainty? How do you deal with all the flux? And we had that at the beginning of 2022, and we still have it today. Fears of recessions, all the elections that were happening here and places like the UK with the crazy transitions in government that was going on there. And then just inflation, wages, so many things. And in so many ways, things are working out. It's still really hard. And I know so many people are really having a hard time, especially with the cost of goods and of food and fuel. But our elections went fairly smoothly in the US. We were all kind of poised to make sure that things didn't break. And for the most part, it went pretty well. And what's really interesting is I'm also worried by just how many things are changing, especially just in the past week. We've seen 2 new technology breakthroughs. We just saw announcements in the past 24 hours about fusion reactions actually becoming possible. Now, we're still a long ways away, where there's more energy coming out of a reaction than energy putting in. And that has so many promises for our energy future. But the first breakthrough, the first time scientists have been able to do that. And I don't know about you, but I've been having a lot of fun with ChatGPT from OpenAI. I've been putting in sentences in there, just prompts, writing stories, writing pieces of content, and it's astounding what it can do. And yet we know that the most exciting areas of technology and development, like AI, are also the areas that are most troubling because there are so many implications around this. I feel really bad for high school teachers, college professors, college admissions officers who now have to look at something and wonder, did a student write this or did an AI write this? So lots of things happening on right in real time to make us think about, okay, how is the world changing? So I see a couple comments here, and I see from Jay, oftentimes crises are seen as opportunities, And inflation is a singular problem rather than an extreme profit taking. Exactly, a really good point. And this last point from Jay, the pandemic has provided a magnifying glass on our existing challenges. I think that's such a great point. And John would argue with me that there is a recession going on. You're probably right. We just don't even know it and realize it. And so all good points to make here that, again, we are in the midst of so many changes and not necessarily good changes in the world. So what I wanted to do was turn the focus onto what we've learned. And I want to reference a little bit about some of the ways of how we actually change. And one of the things I've written a lot about this year is just how change is hard, how change is messy, and how do we move more smoothly through change? Because if we are going from one crisis to another, which is the norm now, how do we actually manage that change? And so the first area is really about what our personal approach to it is. What is our mindset going to be? And how we lead ourselves through this perma-crisis has a lot of impact in terms of how we're going to come out. So some of the things I've written about this year is how do you, when things look really bad, how do you be optimistic? And one of the key ways is to have a gratitude practice. I've written about how to be brave. What does it mean to be brave? And very in particular, how do you be kind to yourself and to your colleagues? Because when we take the time to do that, then we actually can start pulling together a stronger sense of community and frankly, feel a lot better about the relationships we are in our leadership capacity, and be able to lead in a much better way. But one thing that I've been really focused on too is this whole idea of the liminal space, the messy middle. I've talked about that a couple of times. And the idea is that we try to get through change as quickly as possible. We want to get through that transition, go from A to B, and just drive ourselves and drive our teams, our organizations through that change, because it's messy, it's ugly, it's miserable feeling. We want to get to the other side as quickly as possible. And I think very importantly that we need to give ourselves that time for transitions to explore, because it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to see the world differently from where we were before, because we were stuck in this place before where we were. We had to leave it because we agreed that change had to happen. But before we arrive at that new place, that new normal, take that time to say, well, I'm free now from the past and from the future. What are the possibilities and opportunities here? And I think that's something we've gotten very, very good at over the past year. And 2022, because there were so many things coming at us, so many multiple changes, we didn't have the luxury to be able to look at change in an orderly way. We were just thrown into it oftentimes in dealing with multiple crises and change at the same time. And we need to give ourselves and make that space for ourselves to go through that change, to be kind to ourselves and to each other, to be understanding, to give ourselves those moments of grace, and to pause before we go forward. And so when I think about the limiting beliefs that we have, there are oftentimes fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of losing control, fear that our team, lack of confidence in our team to be able to pull through this. And if anything, I hope that you have a lot more confidence now. Not so much that you'll be successful, but that no matter what the outcome is, you're going to be okay, that your team is going to be okay, that we can take on this change, these risks, these motions to move forward, and know that no matter what the outcome, we're going to be okay. So the second thing is how important it is to continue to drive transformations in the midst of crisis. So the first thing is, how do we deal with change, especially when change is hard and messy? Then how do you actually create change in the midst of a crisis? Because the reality is, if you're just reacting to change all the time, just waiting for things to come at you and reacting to it, you're not taking advantage of the opportunity to make the change work on your behalf. So it's really hard to step away back from that and say every single crisis is an opportunity to change and grow, but only if you're looking for it. So some of the key areas around how to manage and drive that transformation is to be constantly looking for the feedback from your team, feedback from the external forces like your supply chain, your customers, your partners, but also being able to hold lots of different ideas, different points of conflict in the same place, being able to look at that feedback and then be able to manage in the fact that people can disagree but still move forward. And a key part for that is the psychological safety, to be able to create that in an organization so you can do transformation. It's been something that is a big theme that came up in a lot of discussions this year, is how do we encourage and build and develop psychological safety so that we can continue to be not just resilient, but also be proactive in the change and transformation that has to happen if you want to weather all of these crises. And then finally, I think the last thing is we need tools. We need practices and processes to be able to lead and manage a perma crisis. One of the things I did back in February, and it feels like it's something even more needed today, is the idea of using scenario planning. Again, you don't know what the future is going to look like. So how do you actually sit down and think about all the things that could go wrong? The fact that the recession might be longer or shorter, not as hard, maybe a little bit softer, the situation economically, but also politically and socially. And then also what are the dynamics inside of your team, the capabilities that they bring to the table. When you throw all these things in, it seems so complex, but when you start breaking it down into various scenarios that then point out to common actions you can take, it starts giving you a way to think about how to manage and to lead across all of these perma crises that are coming at us. The other thing I would say, especially if you're trying to manage the incoming crises, but also manage that transformation, is something I did a few weeks ago about planning in a very different way. I call it the 6-quarter walk. And the idea is that you plan out 6 quarters so that you can have a track of how you're going to proceed every single quarter to achieve your goals and to manage these crises. And the beauty of this is at the end of each quarter, you're reevaluating your plan, extending another quarter so you can take into account all the crises that have hit you over the last quarter, or how your scenarios have changed. So the 6-quarter walk, I think is one of the most powerful tools you can have to not only do planning, but to make sure that the rest of the organization is also on the same page as you. So a couple of things that I see lots of comments coming up here. So just going back, Jake, great, thank you for the comment. That liminal space is an interstitial organic connection. I love that, because when you're in that liminal space, you're highly connected and networked to everybody else who's in that space together, especially going through it as an organization. So thank you for saying that. And Marissa, great comment here. While we want to rush through change, it's not always the best choice, and I so agree with this. Honey versus vinegar. It's important to give ourselves grace in the process. So thank you so much for raising that out. And let's see, I have another comment that John Lombardi says, yeah, we've already been in this recession. It's been 2 negative quarters, but Jay says, but it's been pretty soft. So you can argue whether it's soft or not. It's hitting some people a lot harder. It's hitting other people not so hard. But overall, it could be so much worse. I think we agreed around that. So let's see, Lynn has a great comment here. Times of change are an excellent opportunity to insert customer interests as guardrails for prioritizing and designing the way ahead. I could not agree more. I think that customers should be our guiding light, especially when things aren't clear. It can increase customer centricity, ironically, if leaders are astute to rally around the hand that feeds them. Yes, it's so interesting. Oftentimes I've been talking to leaders now, Lynn, where they're so focused on reinforcing things inside internal processes. And my first question to them is, how are your customers doing? When was the last time you talked to a customer? This is the time when you really want to stay very, very closely in touch with your customers, because they're changing too. And if you can understand how they're changing and understand and read the tea leaves, which is hard to do, but really understand where they're heading, then that gives you a lot of direction about what you should be prioritizing too. But it's more important during these crises to stay connected to your changing customer needs as well. Let's see, I love John's point here. Think of the positive, live on a higher plane, formulate a stop loss net. I would love to hear more about that stop list, not John, how you build it and think about it. And in particular, I love this idea of living on a higher plane, that we are taking ourselves and raising ourselves above all of this turmoil that's being created, and being able to look around with greater clarity to really understand what's going on. And Jay, one last comment here, which I really love. The pandemic is becoming a vehicle for generational change, the sunset of the baby boomer leadership. And as a member of Gen X, I think it's also challenging us as Gen X, again, a couple generations removed from Gen Z. My kids are in Gen Z. And it's really challenging us to think about how our leadership needs to change. And I think, if nothing else, COVID and all of these crises that we've had are ways for us to stop, slow down, evaluate how things and our values, our fundamental beliefs have really changed. And so I just want to close out, just see if there are any other comments, not right now, but if any more come through, I'll definitely take a look at those. What I want to close out with is this parting thought, that as we go through change is the course, and crises now, more than just change, our hair on fire kind of crises is becoming our norm. How will we enter into those spaces? How are we going to be thinking about the ways that we react to these crises, the ways that we lead and manage these crises? And the way that we approach them, our mindset, because leadership is not a title, it's just a mindset of how we approach them, is going to fundamentally determine how well we will go through them. So again, if we see them as opportunities to grow, opportunities to create that space to grow tighter and stronger as a team and as individuals, then we will look at crises from a very different direction, as something, oh no, this is a terrible thing. How could we go through this? How are we going to survive? We'll approach those crises, those challenges in very, very different ways. So I hope that you'll take a moment yourself and review the highlights from the year. Take the time and just go through your calendar. If you're keeping a journal, pull out the highlights. What are the places that you really were struggling and came through the other side? What did you learn through that struggle? Review with your teams. What have we gone through this past year? Instead of just dashing off for the holidays, what have we learned? What are the things that we're going to take away from this? The mistakes that we made, the victories that we had. How did we grow? And that moment of reflection will be a great place to be able to think about where you want to be going off into the future too as well. So that's what I have for today. I wish you the best for the next few weeks if you're celebrating the holidays. And I'm taking a few weeks off, and I'll be back on January 3rd. And I like to make my first live stream of the year talking about what our priorities should be. I don't really like so much predictions, because honestly, it's a lot harder to predict things that are going to happen in the short term than to think about things in the long term. But I do want to put some of that into the ways I think that 2023 is going to roll out, the priorities that you need to have for the coming year. And then also through the rest of the January, I have some really great content talking about just how do you lead and manage through this perma crisis. This, again, some really rich research that we're doing at PA Consulting right now that I really hope that we can dig into a lot. So just thank you, Marissa, for the holiday wishes. Same to you, Marissa, and same to everyone else on this broadcast. It's been a joy. It's been an honor to be able to create this content, to engage with you. It's something I look forward every single week to doing. And it's because of you, your comments, your encouragements, your thumbs up on the posts. Those are all incredibly meaningful to me. And so thank you. Thank you from the depths of my heart to my soul. You are the ones who keep me going on this, keep me motivated, keep me inspired to continue to do this work. And I look forward to seeing you all again in January. All right, take care. Bye-bye.